we'll give, we'll give folks one more minute to get seated and then we'll get started. Okay. All right, sounds good. Thanks. Do we want to advance this? Yeah, we will. Do we have, I don't know if we have an usher, but yeah, maybe. Okay. All right. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you to all of you for attending this important meeting, either here in person in the sanctuary or online. As we shared in the Easter letter, which was sent both by e-blast this week and then also by mail, you should be starting to get those in the mail as well, we do have some financial challenges as a church. And we, as a council, have the whole church council here, do want to provide some additional details and background, along with what's under consideration in order to address these issues. And just want to say, too, really from a council perspective, we've been having these conversations, having tough conversations, and looking at our budget and knowing that we need to start sharing this information with you a couple months ahead of what the budget year is. As Emily said, and Emily set this up so beautifully this morning, and thank you to her. She took words right out of everything I was going to say this morning. But there is a lot going well at FCC. Our pledges are increasing year to year. Attendance in person is up. We have new members, and we have good participation in our program offerings. And we're also in the midst of a successful capital campaign that will address the long-term building concerns and then further fund our endowment. Our members are giving more than ever, and yet we are having some challenges balancing the budget. And we've been able to balance the budget the last few years from different measures, but as we communicated in the annual meetings these last years, these were not sustainable measures. So during the COVID pandemic, we were awarded government grants, specifically the PPP loan, which helped pay salaries when we couldn't open our doors. And we also had a very generous legacy gift from Readopke, which we divided up over the past several years to fill any gaps in the budget. And these funds are now exhausted, and there's no major funds that we can pull in to address any differences between the income and expenses. A couple of key points that I want to highlight. The budget is proposed in the spring each year by the Finance Committee in conjunction with the staff, and the Finance Committee actually has a 3-year budget that they've been working against. And then it's further refined and recommended for approval by the council, and then it's voted on and approved at the annual meeting by the members of the congregation. So this isn't staff working by themselves or council working by themselves or the finance committee working by themselves. This is something that we've been transparent about and that is approved by the congregation, by all of our members. And we've been transparent about using these funds and how long they will last. And as far as expenses, there were lower budget needs that naturally occurred during the pandemic because the building was closed and there were certain activities that weren't happening. But once we were post-pandemic, we made the strategic decision to not significantly cut the budget. So knowing that, yes, we have this gap and we have this DOPKey fund that can help us fill it, but we don't want to make these significant cuts because we wanted the opportunity for the programs to keep growing and to get back to the pre-COVID levels and even beyond. We really wanted to return to our vibrant church community and didn't want to make significant cuts that would curtail our ability to maintain and grow our membership. And so now we're a couple of years post-pandemic, and again, we're doing well, but we're struggling to get the income to cover the expenses. We do anticipate a degree of improvement once we address the building projects, so this will lead to, fewer repairs because we won't be, let's say, repairing our HVAC, which is aging. And it will also help with some energy efficiency, like we're talking about putting in solar panels, but it is going to take a couple of years for us to fix everything and realize those savings. In today's meeting, we are going to cover specifically where the shortages are and where we go from here. We have a deficit of approximately $50,000 for our current budget year, which ends May 31st. And our Easter letter asked for an additional $250 per family to close this gap. So we have about 200 pledging units. And so that means we wouldn't end the budget year with a deficit. And our gap for this year really comes from a lower than expected Christmas offering and a significant drop in what we expected and budgeted from loose offering. So loose offering is when we pass the plate on Sundays. We think this is possibly from the capital campaign or that people converted previous loose offerings into a regular pledge, which is good because then we can anticipate it, but we didn't budget for the loose offering being lower. And it's important that we close this gap to keep operating. Our expenses, despite rising, have actually been kept within budget. And the same number that Emily shared earlier, we've seen a 22% increase in building and utilities expenses due to inflation, as well as a significant increase in our insurance costs. So it's just things keep rising, and it's not that we're spending on extra things or going out and doing extra things, it's just they're more expensive to do. And the larger concern is stewardship for 2025 and the future budgets. And this would be the regular operating costs, how we pay our staff, how we keep the building maintained and pay our utilities so we can maintain the programs. And we changed stewardship this year to run on a calendar year so that we had a fall appeal that went along with our capital campaign. And while we did well, we haven't yet reached that pledge goal. So to date, I think we're at $660K about that's been pledged against a goal of $900,000. The stewardship team, there's a group within stewardship team that are currently making follow-up calls. So for folks that pledged in 2024, 2025, and just hadn't yet updated the realm, or that we hadn't seen a pledge card yet, we're making sure that those pledges are happening. And we hope to meet the goal by the time to finalize the budget, but as Brian will share, we don't necessarily anticipate getting to that $900,000 pledge amount, which would lead to possible staffing or program cuts. And the intent of this meeting is not to name a short list of cuts. It's not to debate the comparative merits of the programs. If we face a significant shortfall, there would be wide-ranging impacts across the board to everything from youth programs to music to pastoral care. And if we can't overcome this, we would work as hard as we can as a council to minimize the impact of these and make more shifts and condensations than actually cutting whole departments and people. But we really don't want to do any of that. I also want to say we are not proposing or looking to pull from, let's say, capital campaign funds or operating, taking anything from our endowment. We're not looking to take drastic measures like selling the building. So I want to just set everyone up for emergency meeting. It sounds like, what are we going to do? It's not anything to that extent, but we do need to shore up more income to meet our expenses or look at where we would potentially cut. So what we want to do today is share the details of where we're at budget-wise, so you're aware of the situation, and we hope this perhaps leads to adjustments in giving. And we are asking for if people can do $250 to close that gap for this year. I've got my envelope from my family where I've got $250 we're giving today to close the gap for 2025. And we'd like to hear your questions and thoughts on addressing the budget deficit. We appreciate your time today and your prayers for the church and leadership as we work to propose the solutions. And I'm now going to pass this along to Brian to provide a more detailed overview, and then we'll save time for questions and your comments at the end. Thank you.
All right, good morning. All right, the financial update. All right, we're going to go ahead and go to, there you go. So from the standpoint of the 3 points I want to talk about this morning is, number one, where we're at with the current year. Number two is going to be on next year, our budget, and what that's going to look like. And then close out a little bit on the capital campaign, what's been done, where we're at with that, and kind of give you a little background on that. So hopefully sandwiching a little bit. You know, we have some good things in the front side, now the next two bad things, and then we'll wind up on a good thing. So if we want to go ahead and go to the next slide. There we go. So from the standpoint of talking about timelines, so I just wanted to make some clarity on this because I think there was some confusion on what we were trying to transition to. So the upper piece, the upper timeline is the accounting year. So we have that from June through May. So for example, June 2024 through May 2025. So you got the years there are in blue and for 2024, and then pink for 2025. I just was double checking because that's how it looked like on my screen. So anyway, so the financial year did not change. We left that alone, and we'll be proposing a budget, as was talked already, for next year, which will be from June of 25 through May of 2026, and that's what we'll approve in the June annual meeting. The bottom part is the stewardship. So if you recall, spring of last year, 2024, we ran a stewardship campaign, and that was in our historical methodology of going from June through May, just like our financial year. Two things that kind of come out of that makes it somewhat challenging is we don't always get all the pledges in time for setting the budget. So as part of the thought, and as we were rolling through and talking about the capital campaign and working with our consultant on that, some of the things that came out made sense to actually switch to a calendar year and then kick off a stewardship campaign alongside the capital campaign. So if we go to the next slide, there we go. So the old process is the top, what we just talked about. So I've always referenced that as the 24-25 stewardship campaign. The bottom piece is the new stewardship that we were doing during the fall as we were doing the capital campaign, which would be a calendar year 25. So I will reference that as a 25 stewardship campaign. So again, most people or all people are going to be planning their giving based on a tax year, so it made a lot of sense to move to there. Plus, when you set the budget, and I don't have firm numbers, we're kind of taking a guess of where we're going to land for pledges and then set a budget based off of that. The intent is if we do this in the fall, by the time we're setting up and doing a budget, we actually have some information that we can actually draw a good budget from. So that was the main change that happened. So we have 24-25 stewardship. That's what we did last spring. And then we were looking for people to fill out a new pledge card for 25, the calendar year. So if we go ahead, and I just wanted to get that out first, and then I'll probably weave that in throughout many things. But if we go to the next slide, we'll start talking about item number one, the current year financials. And there we go. So kind of going and recapping where we were last June when we did our annual meeting. So this is a slide right out of our deck. We proposed a balanced budget. So from that, the only other point I want to make on this slide, if you look at the very bottom piece, we were using the readoptee funds to fully balance our budget for last year. Again, we're using monies that were technically given as an endowment for operating expenses, which really isn't something you want to do from a long-term sustainability process, as well as it's not following our policies that have been set and approved by the congregation. But we had voted to keep it as cash. We voted to use it in this manner to help us through, bless you, the COVID. And then as we were trying to ramp up and get to a point to where we could get the revenue to support our programming and our staffing, that was how we were getting by. So if you think about it, we had, I think it was around 225,000 in PPP grants that we got, and we had about $100,000 from the Adoptee. So we've burned through 325,000 in the last 4 years to balance our budget. That's all gone. So from this point forward, for us to continue to do a balanced budget with that type of methodology, we'll start eroding the long-term sustainability of this church. And at some point in time, someone's going to have to pay the piper. May not be in our time, but it's coming soon. Next slide, if we go to that. This was what we had talked about in terms of the revenue. I guess I should make sure it's that slide, yep. It's from the annual meeting deck. We had pledged amount of $718,000, and we had set the budget at $759,000. And again, someone may ask, gee, why would you go above the amount that was pledged? And it's not that uncommon for us to expect more than the pledged amount. Last 4 years, 2020 to 21, we were at 106% of our pledge. 21-22, 103. 22-23 was 110. And then last year, 23-24, we were at 104%. So we've always trended that way, and there's two main reasons that happens is people do pledge after the year starts and then starts to make payments, and then people do give in excess of what they pledge based on their own personal, what's going on in their life. So they're passing on some blessings back to the church. So it's not uncommon for us to do that. Ideally, we'd like to set it based on what we have for a pledge amount, and then you have a pretty solid base that you're working from. So again, keep that 759 number in mind as we go forward. The other thing, if you go down to bullet 2, Christmas offering was set to our last year offering, or actuals. So from that perspective, we ended up at about 36,000 last year. We ended up about 15,000 this year, so we'll get more into that. Loose offerings, the very next bullet item, we set that as our, basically at our actual for last year. And then obviously the last bullet item was just reiterating that we're using the re-adoptee funds to actually balance our budget. So again, I also mentioned in the annual meeting that was the last time we'd be able to do that because that was going to be gone. So if we go on to the next slide, this will be the expenses that we talked about and approved. And we kind of went through, we did do a 2.5% increase for the staff for cost of living. We had adjusted the cost for insurance by about 6%. We had some additional costs that we expected for facilities and that. And then a couple other items that as we move through. So that's basically what we had from an annual review, or excuse me, annual meeting, and what we had approved for our expense structure. Now, if we go to the next slide, we have, and I will make sure everybody really understands the preliminary is pretty preliminary. I actually pulled the numbers yesterday. It usually takes us a good 4 or 5 business days to get our month end fully closed. So it's not fully reviewed and closed yet, but at least the top line is up to date because that gets updated as we go along the month. So where this puts us is year to date, if you look down the line, operating pledges versus where we're at from a budget perspective, we're about $18,000 behind budget. If you look at Christmas offering, we had $36,000 in our budget. We're at $15,000, and really we're not going to be collecting any more on the Christmas offering. So that's pretty much a $21,000 shortfall. Loose offerings, we had budgeted $77,000, and we're right now at $40,000 at the end of March. So that puts us $37,000 behind on that one. So when you look at what the revenue that's coming in from an operating perspective, that's not coming from an O3 or some other type of account, the amount that's coming in to actually cover our operating, we're $78,000 behind right now at the end of March. So if we compare where we're at, the next bullet items, to where we were last year. So as we've already talked about, operating pledges. We've collected $32,000 more operating pledges to this time compared to last year. So we're collecting more money. We're just expecting to have a little higher. Christmas offering, we've talked about that. I mean, that might have been a drain from the standpoint as we were running capital campaign and all the other types of giving. So it could be explained in that regard, but that's still a $21,000 deficit. And then again, loose offering is off $38,000 compared to last year. So right now, total revenue for operation, we're actually $34,000 behind where we were last year at this time. Before I kind of go on to there's the other thing I want to make sure. So that box at the bottom. So we had at last November, I think it was, we had to borrow from the old 3 accounts to put cash into our operating account because we were running low. So we borrowed 20 grand at that point in time. So I get a text Monday morning that from Betsy, our new financial coordinator, that our bank balance is 7 grand for operating. We have 25 grand to do for payroll. We have taxes of about 10, 12 grand more. We have our workers' comp insurance to pay, our quarterly payment for $1,600, building insurance, quarterly payment of 7 grand, and our gas bill is due, $3,700 bucks. That was $42,000. And we had 7 grand in the bank account. So where we ended up having to go is actually have the 03 accounts, when we have excess, we keep a amount of 03 for all our activities in a bank account, and once it gets over a certain dollar amount, we actually move it over to Merrill Lynch and get a better return, obviously, for the excess. We didn't even have enough in the bank account of 03 to draw from there. We actually had to go take it out of Merrill Lynch to bring it over to balance, to get enough cash so we could cash flow so far this month. So that's kind of where we're at that point. So if we go to the next slide, so that means now we've borrowed $55,000 from the old 3 accounts at this point in time, year to date. So if we go to the next slide, I've put together projections for basically the rest of the year, and I have the revenue coming in at about 953 if we continue on pace, and our expenses are probably going to land around 995. So that's a $42,000 deficit, $43,000. This assumes that the pledges that people have made, at least through either the 24-25 campaign, or they've continued to pay their 25 campaign, and we'll talk a little bit about that, are current by the time we get to the end of May. Basically, this assumes the next 2 months we're collecting about $125,000 in pledges. And right now, if you look at it, we're averaging about $64,000 a month. So that's not going too far out on a limb. If we just continue to make our payments, at least that would substantiate at least my projections. But that will still land below what we had budgeted from a 759 number. So whatever we can get there, that would be great. As we look at the expenses, we had budgeted over $1 million worth of expenses, for the year. I've gone through and estimated that. Just to kind of give you a little background here, if you look at the personnel budget, right now we're right at 97% of year to date what we expected to spend. So it's not an overage on that part. Matter of fact, we're under. Music has been, for the last few months, paying most of their expenses out of 03. So we're not even paying for the music department's expenses that we've budgeted within operating. So they're at about 60% of their budget year to date from an expense perspective. Youth has been doing a similar thing, and they're at roughly 2/3 of their budget year to date. The facilities basically is at budget. So we haven't had a major malfunction on anything, thankfully, so we're at budget for that. And the office expenses is at 98% of budget so far year to date. So if you take those 5 categories, that's 98% of our expense budget right there. So if you look at that, every one of them is either at or below budget. So that's how we're rolling in that slight underage, I guess. I do have some things that I have estimated in there for the balance of the year that shrinks the underage that we're at right now, but that's kind of a buffer, just to make sure, we don't land at a bad spot. But that's where that call to action that we had sent out in a letter of, we need 200 families to give us provide $250 a family to get another 50 grand into the coffers for this year that will end at May 30th. That would help us avoid that deficit for this year. So that gets you kind of where we're at this year. So let's go look at next year. So if we do that, you can pop on to the next one, Mark. This is the 3-year budget that had been talked about. If you look at the current year column, that's actually what we presented at the annual meeting and approved. So that's where those numbers had gone. And if you look year by year, we had gone out and done a 2-year additional forecast at that point in time, or budget, to get a better feel where we're at. Because we did know that the gravy train was ending in terms of using other creative ways to balance our budget. So we knew we needed to get to a level of operating pledges that would help support the operating budget. So we had 857,000, but again, from a target standpoint, we had told stewardship we were looking for 900,000. I will get into some details on that in a little bit. But that was done, this budget was done in May of last year. So if we flip on to the next one and look at the top line there, so the 857 and 886 for operating pledges, but we have, that was basically the plug number. So if I was working through, we went through for Easter offering, Christmas offering, and then what did we need to balance the budget? So those numbers were backed into based on what we needed to do to balance the budget for those years. That's why I want to point that out. All the other revenues were assumed to grow about 3%, and that's how we kind of came up with that total number of operating revenue for upcoming year at a little over $1 million, and then you can see year 3. If we go to the next slide, if we adjust the amounts that we had for Christmas offering and loose offerings, I don't think we can assume 3% from last year's number. Now you're looking at dropping it from an amount that we had seen to 15,800 for Christmas offering and the loose offerings down to about 50,000. So those two numbers will have a pretty profound effect, because if we sit there and assume still the other pieces will grow at that 3%, if we go to the next slide, then we can see the updated number. Next slide, please. Interesting. All righty. I think I copied in the wrong slide. Anyway, fundamentally, if we copy it, I know what I did now, sorry. So basically what that had changed was the 857 number that we had for the original year 2 to 921 to make it a balanced budget, assuming the same, same expense structure. I should quit looking at my notes down below. But anyway, so again, still that's got the same expenses of 3% growth on all the expenses except insurance we had at 6%. So now you can see what that would look like if we make the adjustments to loose offering and Christmas offering. Yeah. Nope, go ahead, keep going forward. Oh, one more, there you go. So right now for the 2025, I was ahead of myself on my notes, so gotta quit looking ahead and look at my slide. The 2025 calendar year pledge. So right now, as of yesterday, we had 193 pledges for 660,000. So that's where we are at that point. If we go to the next slide, we have pledges from 24-25, the old process, that had not pledged yet for the 25 calendar year pledge. Great majority of those folks are still making their payment, but it does make it challenging for me to sit there and set a budget. So of that, there's 56 of those pledges for 100,000 from the 24-25 that have not pledged the 25. Now, I'm sorry? Yeah. Didn't we already move? Oh, we should have moved to the next slide. Sorry. There you go. Now I'm talking about what we have on the screen. But again, these are folks that have pledged for the 24-25, but have not pledged for the 25 calendar year campaign. So if we go to the next slide after that, there we go. If we add those two together, that gets us to 249 pledging units, which is a pretty big number considering where we have been, 180, 190, for 760,000. So now, if we go to the next slide, if I plug in the 760 that we have, that puts us at a $161,000 deficit, keeping the expenses as we had talked about before. Now, to balance the budget, we either increase revenue or decrease expenses. And I don't think it's necessarily a binary decision on that part. We're going to have to move levers, I think, in both directions to really get to a balanced budget. I think that's just a cold, hard fact in that regard. So at this juncture, if we can make sure the pledges that we had that are in the 24-25 can update their pledge for the 25 calendar year, that would be great. In my understanding, I think there's another 60 or so that we're trying to contact from stewardship of roughly that have not pledged. So that's kind of the numbers that we're working through. For a point of reference, the 24-25, there was a total of 186 pledging units. So we've grown the number of pledging units by a significant amount, and that's probably why our loose offering is diving down so greatly, is because we've converted folks that were just doing on the Sunday offering and have actually now are pledged and paying. So again, another reason not to be too optimistic of jumping back up to last year's numbers for loose offerings. So if we flip over to the next slide to go through, I just kind of walked through three scenarios where we got the 24-25 projections, so that's kind of what we have for the expenses at 995. I had shown that earlier. The 25-26 budget was from the 3-year budget, so that was where the $1,037,000 we had estimated at that point in time. If we go to potential number 1 column, what I have done there is kept the amount that we had reduced for facilities, because the expectation is we just take care of normal routine things, and then as we have major items, the expectation is we'd have most likely that being handled by the capital campaign. And then make the adjustments to where music, youth, and all other ministries kind of hold where they're at this year, where they were funding it from other sources than operating. And then if we go to potential number 2, is where we literally wipe out the ministries, and they got to basically self-fund some way, shape, or form. But I want to make sure I make a point here. They've been funding this year's operating expenses by using some of their 03 accounts to do that. Again, that's not a long-term sustainable solution. The 03 accounts are there for support of the specific program. So it should not be how they would do. So then they would actually have to change some of their methods of actually saying, hey, to participate may require fees or whatever it may be. But even that only still gets us to about a $60,000 deficit. And that's what leads us to the heavy conversation that we are at today of what does that look like if you go on to the next slide and start talking about now staff reductions. And it's already been talked about. I mean, that could impact choirs and Sunday school. It's been talked about pastor care, facility care, office support, many different impacts. Council's been talking about this, and we've kicked around many different items. By all means, I've been in a treasurer position before, and I had the distinct pleasure of doing this back in 2008 when we had the Great Recession, so that was entertaining. And we've always had issues with getting a balanced budget, so we've always kind of gotten creative and gotten there. I remember Eric mentioned after our council meeting last week as we were talking through this and made the decision we need to do this meeting to present to the congregation that he was reminding me of a time in our annual history that there were notes from a meeting that they were short $30 and we're going to have to close the church. And somebody came forward with the $30 to make sure the church didn't close. I'm not saying we're on the verge of closing. What I'm talking about is we're at a point in time where to make this a long-term sustainable operation with all the items that we do so well and has been talked about this morning, it's just, we stopped kicking the can down the road on the capital campaign. We're taking care of the building. We've gotten some good commitments out of that. It's just time now to turn on the operating budget and not quit kicking that can down the road as well. So from that standpoint, there's no definitive decisions by any grouping within the council, finance committee, or anybody about what should be done from a cost reduction or any of that type of items. I think that's for the discussion here in the next 30 to 60 days, as well as trying to firm up our top line as best we can. I know I've gotten feedback where it's like, well, what's going to be your recommendations? I'm not going to make recommendations at this juncture. I don't think it's prudent. It should be a group discussion. It should be where people are weighing in. We should be making sure we have a good understanding what our top line looks like from a revenue perspective, and then discern from there. So again, I think Adria pointed it out. This isn't a time to debate on saving this one and letting this one go, or anything from a program, staff member, anything. That's not what the intent of today is. So more to come on that. Now if we flip on to number 3, capital campaign. And so we have 166 pledges for $2.3 million. As of yesterday, we actually have cash sitting in a bank account at $809,000, which at this juncture is pretty amazing if you think about it. I agree. There's been meetings between the facility ministry, council, the capital campaign leadership. We've started to talk through what it looks like for what projects will get done, the prioritization, looking at the timing and anticipated cash flows so that we can support that schedule. A couple of items to kind of note in general. I mean, it's not fully baked at this juncture. There's a lot of work, and I'm looking at John right now. There's still a lot of work to be done. They're busy working on getting firm quotes and that type of stuff of the items that we're looking to move forward on. So a lot of these are some estimates that were done back in 2019 with a percentage add, so we still have some work to be done. But at this juncture, 2025, we got the fire panel upgrade that's going to be going on. The boiler controllers need to be upgraded. LED lighting installation in other areas outside of the sanctuary, because there's things that we'll be doing in 2026 that will address the sanctuary. We have some issues in the parking lot with our catch basins that need to get repaired. And then the really major heavy lifting is really developing the full plan for 2026. And the 2026 will target the sanctuary, the building exterior, as well as the parking lot. And then that would be a major piece of everything we're talking about in terms of the capital campaign. But that's just kind of giving you a feel. I did want to have something at least uplifting before I finished my part, so I'm not associated with all these bad news. But I think this is amazing stuff to be at, over 800,000 in cash to actually be able to start executing some projects. So with that, I think we got a mic and we can start asking some questions. Oh, I apologize. I do have one thing. I did get a letter here from Alora and Rick Fergus that they asked me to share. And it said, "We are unable to attend the meeting on Sunday and would like to convey our thoughts. We, as the congregation, cannot afford to let any of our programming be cut, be it our choirs, bells, Sunday school, JF, or PF. If anything, we need to invest in enhancing our programs, especially the children's programs. This would help to attract new families to FCC, which would help correct our budgetary problems. Just as important are ministries and our staff. Without them, nothing would be possible. We would encourage old and new members and visitors alike to pledge and be the church. Remember that it's not the church, it is our church." And then that's how they concluded. Please feel free to share this in the meeting. And I thought that would be appropriate to share. Because as much as it pained me to have to stand up here and do today's presentation, I don't want to see anything get cut. So anyway, we'll open it up to questions.
So just so I'm understanding this correctly, with the call to action, would that be just adjusting the, would we need to pledge that money now, or could we adjust our weekly pledge donations to make up for that shortfall?
Yeah, so right now, between now and May 30th, if we don't get to 250 at 200 pledges or 200 units, however it may come in, then it wouldn't help us not avoid a deficit for this year. Now, if folks can adjust their pledge, that'll help us definitely for our budget for next year. So I'm not going to discourage that. Whatever you can prayerfully discern for you and your family that makes sense, rock and roll.
Yeah, hi, thank you. Nice presentation. What is the total number of pledge units in the congregation?
How many pledging units that are in the database?
In the entire congregation. I mean, how many, if you take...
Actually, it'd probably be interesting. Well, let me rephrase this. So I know there's been a lot of work done by the capital campaign and the stewardship as we were running that together, because the teams that were running that scoured through our rosters and made calls. So based on what I think I understand, and Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, if I combine the two numbers from the 24-25 that had pledged but not in the 25 and the 25, that's 249. And my understanding is we have 60 that we had contacted that did not pledge. So that puts us right around 300.
And
the 214 number? Okay. Okay, so you got 219 plus 70 then is? Oh, that includes the 219. Oh, all right.
so
That makes it worse.
it would seem to me, it's a business, right? I mean, we are a congregation and
Yep.
we have a mission, and that's wonderful. But it's a business, it's a $1 million business, frankly.
Yep.
And you would think that your pledges would encompass both operating and some capital contribution elements, potentially, so you're not having to run capital campaigns continually every few years. So when we rejoined the church after a number of years being out of town.
Mm-hmm.
And would it be helpful to provide some guidance to members in terms of what that an ideal or suggested pledge would be given the operating expenses? I mean, I mean, we contribute, obviously, through pledging,
Mm-hmm.
but, you know, looking at these numbers, which I haven't seen before, you know, maybe we're not giving enough, you know, frankly. There might be potential if you gave some guidance to members on what an ideal or suggested pledge would be. I know some people couldn't make that, I understand that.
Sure.
Maybe there's other ways to give to the church other than, you know, monetarily as a pledging unit.
Definitely.
So, you know, I'm wondering, you know, given the numbers, if you take your $1 million expense and divide it by whatever the number of pledge units you have, 250.
And I'll just say it in this manner. Right now, our median pledge is $3,000 a year.
Doesn't seem sufficient, given you have 200 pledge units.
Yeah, so it doesn't get skewed because if you have one or two big donors, and if you take a mathematical average, it'll skew it. If you did that, we're up closer to almost $5,000 when you do that. But if you look at the midpoint, 50% above, 50% below, it's $3,000. Use the mic so people can hear.
Well, I did some math based upon your numbers that you ran. It seems to me that it would have to be closer to about $4,000 per pledge unit.
And don't disagree with that either. But I think if you really think about it, right? So we had a preaching series that was done on tithing. And if you go to the median income, whether you Google Crystal Lake, McHenry County, it's about $104,000. Do the quick math on that. So basically 3%. So again, but that's the median, right? There's lots of folks that are and especially in today's economy, I mean, who knows what's going to be going on in the next 12 months. There's already news on layoffs. So, I mean, I know some folks in the congregation are going to be having some tough times coming up. The flip side is, you know, obviously I think there's opportunity on the other side of the equation for folks that are being blessed. So, again, prayerfully discern what you can do. But yeah, it'd be ideal if we could get that extra 1,000 per pledging unit as well.
Can I jump in?
Oh, go right ahead. I don't mean to hog the whole. I know we called it the Brian Show, but.
No, it's good. I think I will say one thing we've done, I don't know that we did it in this year's stewardship campaign, but there used to be a table on the back for giving to say, if your income is this much and you're targeting this percent, this is what it would look like per year, per month. So there were some tabular breakdowns, but I don't know that we're, from a stewardship approach, and I mean, I guess, Steve, keep me honest, we're not necessarily going to people and saying, we think you can give this much. This is how much you should give us. Like, we're not asking for people's W-2s, but I think, I mean, maybe we could, I guess I would be curious to hear too, what would be the most helpful way to guide people to giving. Tithing biblically is 10%. That was the tithing challenge of income. Thanks.
Again, Steve Hoblin, I'm the current stewardship chairperson, and I can give you a historical perspective based on the UCC, because for those who've talked to me, had the unfortunate occurrence to be on the other line of me, I'll give you, when I've called about 65 people myself during this campaign, so I've gotten a lot of feedback. But growing up in the church, we usually use the number that 10% of the congregation anywhere, at least in the UCC, gives about 90% of the operating part. And I don't think that number's changed significantly. Again, the church is like a business, but it's not like a business because we are depending on volunteer giving. We don't have revenue sources that we can count on. I mean, historically, yes, we can, but we have to ask. So you can't tell people that they need or should or can give this. And trust me, the way the church did this campaign and stewardship campaign is very novel and well thought out. And I come to you as a fairly new member, only 2 years here, but I've always wanted to see this work. So this is new ground. It's cutting ground in the context of a church to do this, but the results are what they are, and to me, they are very, losing the word, but I mean, it's consistent with what the church does. I mean, we run into people who have given large gifts, which churches count on. We've run into people who are giving little bits, but that's all they can give. They need to know their money matters. We wanted to meet with everybody, every giving unit, and that's how the capital campaign and the stewardship was designed and planned out, but you can't force people to meet with you. So we have the graphs and we have the literature to show you where the money goes and what's needed, but I'd say, again, I think there was 114 people on the list that we wanted to contact this second round, or what we call phase 2. 70 of those were giving units that hadn't updated their pledges or hadn't submitted a pledge. So that's where my numbers are coming from.
Okay.
But again, 114, roughly half of that 214 number that I'm using weren't contacted or didn't take a visit, so they don't know. We've tried, ultimately, is what it's done. And FCC has gone above and beyond trying to explain where their money goes. And as a new member, I want to congratulate the church leadership for doing this. It's a lot of work. It's a pain in the keister to go through all this. There's a lot of people involved and a lot of people gnashing teeth and crunching numbers. And so it's a long-winded answer, but that's kind of the background of where things are and where they came from. And again, still hopeful. This is where your faith comes from, that we can get the people to update their pledges and give what they can. I still say, give what you can. You can't go to bed at night worrying when you go to sleep that you're not going to make your bills, but we do need to be a part of those bills. And if you look at it as a savings plan or a giving or a donation plan, you can budget us in what you think you can give, whether you skip a bowling night, a pizza night. We're not asking you to cancel your vacation or your cruise, but please think of us when you decide what your budget looks like, if you budget.
He's next, I'm sorry.
And then Dan, we got another one in the back too, so. You'll get your steps in today.
Hello? Hi. If I understand this correctly, the $900,000 budget covers 12 months beginning June through next May, correct?
That would be the counting year, yes.
Right, okay. And the current pledge year is only through 2025 December, right? So appears to me what we're missing is the 2026 portion of the pledge.
Correct, which we would hit, yeah. And it's not so much, we'd carry that forward from a budget perspective estimate, but we still would run a fall campaign for calendar year 2026. And ideally, you would see, hopefully, an uptick.
But that would cover some of the budget that you have right now, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
But it
So-
also would be, you also have budgeted expenses, and who knows what inflation's going to be doing by then as well. So,
Right.
but go ahead.
But if it's, we're trying to cover 7 months in this pledge period, that would be 525,000. And we have pledges of 660,000.
For the calendar
So-
year, correct.
Yes, so to me, it appears like we're 135,000 ahead.
Not necessarily, because I took a 12-month total for the pledge. Whether I use the 24-25 pledge that technically ends here in May, or the calendar year 25, I included 12 months. You are correct that there could be a potential upswing in calendar 26 as we go January through May,
Right.
or potentially downturn, because who knows how people will pledge for 2026.
Right, but the way the pledge is set up, we don't have the visibility now that we had in the past.
Correct. But it's better visibility than I have today, where when we're doing the calendar year, or the June through May, I'm not getting pledge cards sometimes in June and July. I've already set the budget, it's already been approved and everything else. We're making estimates at that time. If I at least have a calendar year, I'm working from a solid knowledge base of what we do have commitments on.
But it still appears that we're ahead of the game by that, to me. So I'm confused.
It has an opportunity to be an upswing for us, yes. But I don't know that you can bank on that because it's not uncommon for people to move their pledges up or down depending on their circumstances from year to year.
I think I know where you're coming from, Larry, so let me see if I can clarify it a little bit. What we're looking at from the budget is we have the pledges for the calendar year 2025 in a budget of only 7 months. So we kind of have a knowledge of 7 months of the 7 months of the year, kind of guaranteed that we know what's coming in. And the assumption would be when we're building the budget that people will renew their current pledge in 2026. So that 5 months is kind of, I guess, a guess because everybody could make their pledge zero and would be in trouble. But the expectation would be we have 7 months worth of knowledge while we're building the current June 2025 to May 2026 budget. So we have 7 months worth of knowledge, and we're kind of estimating where that final 5 months would go. So that's why we're kind of still behind. No, we're making the assumption that people will continue or renew their pledge of 2025, at least in 2026, and hopefully raise that. So we're, like I'm trying to say, is we have 7 months worth of knowledge based on your current pledges for 2025 when we're building our budget year of 2025 through 2026. The 660 is what is pledged now, correct?
Correct.
It's a pledge, yes. So it's, no, we're assuming so it's 660 for the calendar year 2025. No, okay, I'll let you.
Yeah, all right. So we have calendar year 2025 pledging of 660. The assumption is we'll also get that same 660 from June through May of 2026. So the budget includes 12 months based on what was pledged for the calendar year 2025. Exactly. So the concept also is then we still have to run a campaign come fall of this year for calendar 2026. The anticipation or the hope is that you would actually have a bump. So the back 4 or 5 months of the year, when people start doing their 26 calendar, you have slight uptick. But we don't have that in the budget. We assumed that people carried their 2025 calendar pledge through 2026 calendar. I think, Dan, you got another one?
So when my husband was doing the pledges right now, at least what he was telling me is online, you cannot get in to give to the 2024, 2025. You can only do the 2025 giving. We did talk to the church and got that all straightened out. But if you have people that want to give online to help, they can't do it for the 2024, 2025 right now, unless you contact the church.
So I'm sorry, when you give online, you're saying you can't choose 24, 25 as the giving period?
Yes.
All right. But you're grabbing the 25. But when we put that in the system, that'll still show, I mean, we still break down giving by year because we have to present it to you at the end of the year for your tax purposes. So even though you're giving to the 24-25 campaign, it is actually going in the 25 bucket. That makes sense? Well, even before, I mean, we had to recoup it or classify it by year anyway, because we give out at the end of the year what you gave to the church for that calendar year for your tax purposes. So there was always confusion, because you had a pledging year that was from June to May, and you get to December, and that actually had a chunk from your prior year pledging year, as well as this year's pledging year, and then you got a tax statement from us, and then we were showing what we had collected for both pledging years. Now you will get a tax receipt that shows you gave for a calendar year, and it will match what you had pledged for a calendar year. So that reconciliation that gets kind of wacky goes away. So you actually match the year. So I hope that answers your question, because it'll be reported for 2025, even though it's a 24-25 pledge.
I just want to make a brief clarification. There's a difference between giving and pledging, and I think people get confused about those two things. So on the church website, there is a place to pledge for your 2025 pledge. A pledge is a promise. It's a commitment. I'm going to give this much money in the year 2025. That is what we build a budget on, what we know people have pledged. Giving is actually giving money. So if you want to give to help fix that deficit that we're having for the 24-25 calendar year, you can just hit give. And then you can put in the memo, close the gap. You know, Easter offering, it's I forgot, is there any other special wording in the letter? But you can note that in the memo. You can pledge for two things. You can pledge for the 25 operating account stewardship campaign, which is what we use to run the church, pay the clergy, pay the staff, pay for insurance, keep the lights on. That is the pledge, your stewardship pledge. You can also pledge for the capital campaign. That is a 3-year commitment to help cover repairs to the building that have been long delayed. So those are the two areas that you can pledge online. If you want to give, just hit give now. And that is outside of your regular pledge, and that would be for special things like, sorry, I'm rolling away here. It's like getting the hook, right? Anyway, yeah, there's a drop down for regular giving, and you can say, this is, I want to give, this is part of my pledge, I want to give because I want to buy lilies, I want to give because I'm helping to close the deficit from last year, or whatever it is that you want to give to. So maybe that helps clarify.
Hi, Wendy Moylan, member since 2019, happily have given ever since. Sure. I just want to offer a message of gratitude. I know everyone on the stage are volunteers, and it's amazing the amount of time and effort you put in. And I have been actually emailing pastors and Lisa, who's been forwarding my questions this week. So thank you for offering answers then and today. Also, just a shout out to Brian, who does this on a volunteer basis and does it amazingly. For what it's worth, from little old me, I'm a fundraiser of 30 years, and if some of this has gone over your head or is confusing to you, everything that's been said today is completely clear to me, and I'm very impressed in just the way that you want to envision the future. And while you called this an emergency meeting, it really is something we all need to talk about, especially in times. I've been in not-for-profits for 30 years, and we're all facing a very uncertain future. So the fact that we can talk about this and do it proactively, I'm very grateful for. Just want you to know that I went onto Realm this week. It was very easy to extend my pledge that I forgot to extend through December. You just change the dates. It's very easy. If you need help, I'm here. And I will be happy to give another $250, even though I'm facing unexpected expenses at home, because this church is wonderful.
Cool.
So thank you.
Thank you.
This could be dangerous.
Have we sent anybody out to talk to one of those mega churches that seems to be doing pretty well?
Talk to a mega church about what?
Oh, just, they seem to be doing pretty well, some of those, big.
I can say I have not, but
Yeah,
I don't know if anyone on the council has.
some of the pastors that live in those.
I know one of the big one that's nearby will ask you for your W-2. So I don't know if you want to hand over your W-2 and have somebody tell you what you're going to give. But I know that's the local megachurch does.
Thank
me.
you. Thank you. I echo what Wendy says. Thank you so much for your time and your generosity and service. In thinking about creative ways and how to move forward, have we looked at, and excuse my ignorance on this, but like, for example, with the music program or certain programs that we do, like looking at grants or other kind of more sustainable gifts that are out there that might be helpful? I mean, I'm just asking, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure what there would be in that realm, but yeah, sure. Oh, definitely. Yeah. Yep. Go ahead.
I think we get one salary grant for the really young kid music program. That's about $5,000 a year. I don't know that, I'm not aware of what else is available, but it's a great idea. I will say too, from a revenue stream perspective, we're looking at, one of the things we talked about last week in our building discussions is there opportunity for, as we renovate, to look for more rentals. Eric Pfister knows of a lot of nonprofits that need inexpensive rental space. So originally we were hoping for right below here in the old Fellowship Hall, but with the HVAC needs and that sort of thing, it's probably not feasible. So, looking at what else we could do with our other rooms, because we do have a big space. But yes, that's a consideration too of how can we bring in more revenue that's not just us. Yeah. Thank you.
We're definitely thinking diversion.
Yes. Thank you.
All right. Here we go.
Oh, this is going to be really tough on you.
Yeah, I gotta
So
go home
first,
too,
I
so.
just want to urge everybody, if possible, to give right now $250 if you can give more right now, so we can immediately fix this problem before the next 2 months, so we can continue. And then I have a few ideas for
Rock
our
and roll.
future. And just like truthfully, the first thing that came to my mind is we should be the miracle offering. While I love helping our community, our church has been struggling for some time, and instead of possibly giving or raising money to give to our community, maybe volunteer our time and use that money for our church. Because I think that's why our Christmas offering's been down the past couple of years.
Mhm.
You can't do both. A lot of families can't do both, so they don't. I also feel like, I know the Boy Scouts, I'm not picking on them. They're part of this church. I think they need to financially be part of this church. There's wear and tear and maintenance, heating, air conditioning to them using this building, and there's no cost on their end. I feel like financially we could go to them and ask for money for that. And I think additionally our rooms could be charged more money. For our music department, which I am a part of and love, I don't think there'd be many people opposed to paying a yearly fee for being in those programs. In my average, I thought $100 a year, there's at least 80 people. That's $8,000 added to the budget every year. I have more, but I'll just stop there.
I wasn't writing anything down because I heard them all, so.
But
But no, I mean, those are some of the thoughts that we need to look at as well, so. Go ahead.
So we are at 12:30, so I guess I could leave, are there any last questions or comments? So I think you could do either Easter or close the gap. I think it came out with the Easter. Close the gap, don't do Easter.
Yeah, just so we're clear, so this is close the gap. I'd literally just put close the gap on it. We still have an expectation from a budget perspective for an Easter offering. So we still have an expectation based on what we had from last year of $7,700 coming in for Easter offering. So please do not put the $250 as Easter. Do that and then consider Easter offering as well. Thank you. There we go, all right.
All right, so I will go ahead and get this closed out. Thank you to Brian, thank you to the council, thank you to staff that have been part of these discussions as well. And PR, we've had PR supporting us as well. And thank you for attending this. So please do expect that there will be further updates on this topic as we approach the annual meeting. So Steve Hoblin, from a stewardship perspective, they are still making those phone calls. They are still getting those pledges. And if you have a chance to look at what you've pledged for the 25 calendar year, if you can prayerfully consider what that looks like. Is there an opportunity to give more to help us close that $161,000 difference? We will have that feedback coming in real time and be able to use that. And we start making budget recommendations, I think, around the May meeting is when we start really making that recommendation in council, and then we have to get that out to the congregation. Our annual meeting is June 23rd. I think it's like last half of the month. I think that's the precise date, potentially. So if the earlier we have that information, the faster that allows us to work and really understand where we're going to wind up. And of course, we do want to hear from you. So if you have any additional feedback, if you go home and think, gee, this is how I feel about this or that, and what about, have you considered this? Please reach out to the church office, or you can reach out to us directly. So we're all in Realm. All of our email addresses are in there. Phone numbers are in there. So if you want to talk to anybody on the church council, we'd love to hear your additional feedback as we work through this. And thank you again for attending today. We appreciate you.
And Al Cunningham would have been here. He's the other member. He had a death of a close family friend, so he's out of town today. But anyway, we thank you.
Thank you.